Ducks roll past the Texas Tech Red Raiders, and it really wasn't much of a contest through the whole thing. I mean, if you watch this game, it was honestly kind of ugly the way it was all presented. Um, Oregon didn't look great. Texas Tech looked pretty awful on offense. Let me mute that. And overall, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of this game, but first of all, happy new year to all of you guys. This is the first college football game of the new year. I love it, love to see it, and we're looking forward to a great 2026 both on the channel, in life, and in college football. So the Oregon Ducks roll past Texas Tech. They win 23 to nothing, really 16 to nothing there with that garbage touchdown at the end by Davison as he ran it in for the score there at the end of the game, running up the score. I mean, what else do you do when you're on the 1 yard line and you have like, you know, 30 seconds left in the game? You got to go for it and you got to just go and score that touchdown. And, but that's really beside the point as we continue this live stream here. Really, the main points were I put out my game storylines for this game. First one was how aggressive will Dan Lanning be? Well, Dan Lanning was really aggressive. We will look into the stats, but I'm pretty sure he went for it on fourth down probably 7 or 8 times. He pulled off a fake punt. He rolled the dice every single time he could. And he didn't get it every single time. That's for darn sure. I mean, really, for darn sure. He did not make it every time. But what happened? They were so good on defense that they didn't have to worry about giving it up at midfield, giving it up at the 30-yard line, giving up at the 40-yard line, what have you. They didn't have to worry about that. As long as they were within striking distance and they had a prayer of getting that first down, they were going to do it this whole time. You know, it turns out Texas Tech didn't do anything on offense, and we'll get into that in a second. But even if Texas Tech had gotten it even 10 points, we'll say, it's just the way Dan Lanning works. Dan Lanning has lived and died by the sword. He's a gambling guy. I mean, he lives on the edge of a knife. Enough euphemisms here, but Dan Lanning is one of the most aggressive coaches out there, and he showed that today, and it paid off big time. It was borderline reckless, in my opinion, but that's the way he styles his team to be. And if he backs down, then really that takes all the steam out of his offense. And I loved how Oregon came out to start the game because you have Texas Tech, one of the best defensive fronts in college football. I'd say their defensive line is top two right there with Miami. They're both about the same in my opinion. Probably give the edge a little bit to Texas Tech, but I digress. They come out and what do they do to counter that ferocious pass rush? And the run wasn't working early. They tried to establish the run, which we'll go into that in my second point here. They tried to establish the run. It really didn't work. There were 2 or 3 TFLs in that first drive that Oregon had. But what did they do to counteract that? They went turbo. They went as fast as humanly possible to the line. Like they said on the broadcast, it took time for it. I mean, it was taking the chain gang longer to get the chain set up than, they weren't keeping up pace of play. And that really tells you something because those guys go really, really fast. And I love how they came out and they completely countered Texas Tech's defense beautifully. They went down the field and they just kind of continued to do that the rest of the game. It's really how it was. And so, how aggressive was Dan Lanning? He was uber aggressive. And that's how they won the game. It was borderline reckless, in my opinion. Yes, I agree. But that aggressiveness paid off because it's Oregon. Oregon needs to run tempo offense. Oregon needs to go at a pace in order to run. This Oregon team needs to run at pace. And that's exactly what they did today, and Texas Tech was not able to keep up. My second point going into this game was, will Oregon be able to run the ball effectively? And by the end, you could say that they did. But they didn't to start out, but they kept going back to it because they had the luxury to do so. Because Texas Tech was not putting any pressure offensively on the Ducks. It wasn't like, it was 7-7 at half and Texas Tech got the ball and Texas Tech looked somewhat competent on offense. They didn't at all. and we'll get into that in a second. But Oregon was able to run the ball effectively by the end of the game. You know, they had 64 rushing yards, not super high total, but it did what it was supposed to. Jordan Davison averaged 2.8 on the ground. Noah Whittington averaged 2.4 on the ground. Not great, but it did the job. And they established a run game. It wasn't a great run game, but they established a run game. Turns out they didn't have to run for a single yard. They were going to score, and Texas Tech ended up not scoring a single point in the game, but I digress. Which quarterback could throw under pressure better? Obviously, Dante Moore showed that he could throw under pressure more. Although he didn't do a great job of it, yes, he was sacked, I think, 3 times in this game. I want to check that really quick. He was sacked twice in this game. But this really falls more on Behren Morton. He was incompetent out there. Like, what are we doing? Texas Tech has a championship caliber defense, and all you can do is sit there and you can't even hit your running back in the flat. And credit to Oregon's defensive front because they were ferocious today, but that's not the full picture. Because he had a clean pocket and he's skipping the ball into his wide receiver running a 5 yard curl route to his running back in the flat to his tight end 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. And it really showed that he was an incompetent quarterback. 18 for 32 was his final stat line. 2 interceptions, no touchdowns, obviously, 137. And we go back to last night when I was talking about Carson Beck and how reliable he was, only throwing 138 yards. One more yard than Behren Morton in this game. And Behren Morton awful, was awful in this game. And Carson Beck, some could say, really helped them win that game. Well, he definitely really helped the Hurricanes win that game. So, when we're talking about all this here, which quarterback could throw under pressure better? Well, Behren Morton didn't throw under pressure. Well, excuse me. I have to rephrase that. He didn't throw good under pressure at all. Dante Moore did some of the time, and Dante Moore had plenty of struggles in this game against one of the best, if not the best, defensive front in America. Sure, but he did not play up to standard today. And I'm going to talk about this at the end, but I think this Oregon team really does resemble the 2024 Penn State team. And I have a lot more to say about that going forward. My last point here for these game storylines was, will Texas Tech's defense hold Oregon's offense? They did for a while, but when your offense keeps just being abysmal, no first down, three and out, three and out, three and out, three and out, there's no way you can hold them all the time on defense. There's no way. There's no way when Oregon gets handed the ball at their own at their 6 yard line, 6 yards to score from a touchdown, first and goal. What can you do as a defense? When your quarterback just gets strip sacked and Mateo Uyunglele takes the ball and just runs 20 yards in the opposite direction, what can you do as a defense? Defense can't win you the game when it comes down to the clutch factors. Yes, defense wins championships, but you also have to have an offense to go with that championship level defense. And that's exactly what happened today. Defense does win you championships, but offenses win you the game. And when you are this close to reaching the CFP semifinal, reaching the college football playoff national championship, if you're Texas Tech, you have to reevaluate. Behren Morton cannot be your starting quarterback next year. You hit on every single portal target. Even Quentin Joyner, I think. The USC transfer running back, he didn't even play this season. And I think I got that name wrong, but I digress. He didn't even play this season, and I think they hit on him too. So their portal hits were just abundant and plenty. If they do the same thing this offseason and they get a quarterback, let's say they get Dylan Raiola, a DJ Lagway, a Brendan Sorsby, they really could. Let's say you insert Brendan Sorsby into this offense right now. I think that they win this game because of how sloppy Oregon played. I really do. Because Oregon's skill players were not half bad too. They also have to fix the offensive line, but that's a different story. So, did Tech's defense hold Oregon's offense? Yes, but not enough. Not enough of the time. If any other team in America's defense played like how Texas Tech did against Oregon, most teams in America would beat Oregon. I'm going to be completely honest with you because of the amount of times they held Oregon. They, you know, Oregon had a lot of offensive issues, and we'll get into that. But it was pretty bad. Then I have a couple player storylines that I went into my preview that I want to go into right now. First one that I really harped on was the Oregon offensive tackles versus the Texas Tech DNs. And the Texas Tech DNs won a lot of the time versus Oregon's tackles. Isaiah World looked terrible out there. A couple terrible holdings, got beat a couple times, was not good. Alex Harkey on the other side did not look good in this game, and that scares me if I'm Oregon. Honestly, coming out of this win, I feel more scared for Oregon than I did going in, not knowing what the final score would be. And they won by 23 points. So that says something that really says something to how incompetent Texas Tech is on offense, but really Oregon's personnel issues were not good in this game at all. Texas Tech's receivers versus Oregon's secondary. This was the huge win for Oregon that I wasn't sure was going to happen. Oregon's secondary just lit up the Texas Tech receivers all the time. And it wasn't even particularly close. Wasn't even particularly close. And what I really got from that was that Oregon's secondary is going to be able to hang with the best of them. Be it Bama or Indiana, Oregon's secondary is going to win. I think that they will. But it all comes down to if you look on the losing side with Texas Tech, their receivers, they don't have half bad receivers. It was just for me, it was the quarterback play. Again, if you insert Brendan Sorsby onto this team, I think they win this game. I honestly do. I think with Brendan Sorsby, this team probably or insert, whatever quarterback you want. Dylan Raiola, you know, any of the other portal quarterbacks out there, DJ Lagway, etc., Josh Hoover. I think that they end up winning this game because what was it? With about 20 seconds left, it was 16 to nothing. You don't think Texas Tech with Brendan Sorsby or Dylan Raiola can get to 20 points, 17 points, 18 points? I certainly think so. If you disagree with me, put it in the comments below. And last thing I'll say here before we get into the stats. Actually, let's just get into the stats right now. As we get into it here. Dante Moore, 26 for 33, 234 yards, one interception. He didn't play his greatest today. He really didn't. It was bad, in my opinion, for Dante Moore's standards and what I hold him to. For Oregon standards and what I hold him to, it wasn't very good at all, in my opinion. Sorry about that. And he's got to be a lot better. He really does. On the other side, Baron Morton, 130 yards passing, two interceptions, wasn't good at all. Again, I don't want to harp on this guy too much. I honestly feel bad for him. But he looked like a G5 quarterback if I've ever seen one in this game. Honestly, the two G5 quarterbacks, Jake Retzloff and the other guy for JMU, I blanked on his name. I don't know why. I should know it. But Alonzo Barnett. Alonzo Barnett. Both those guys looked twice as they looked way infinitely better than what Baron Morton looked today. Julian Sayin last night looked better than Baron Morton today. I'm going to be honest with you. Texas Tech rushing, Jacoby Williams had the big 50-yard run, but past that, he had 31 yards on the ground past the 50-yarder. And I mean, it's all right, but, it just didn't match up well. Texas Tech's offensive line did not match up well. Tosh Lupoi called a heck of a game for Oregon's defense. And on top of that, he's the head coach at Cal at the same time he's coaching Oregon to the CFP semifinal. So good on Tosh Lapoy. I think that this was a real breakout game for him as a play caller because he's had some really rough games in the past, let's be honest. And as we get into it here, Oregon receiving, it was just kind of all over the place. Throws to Jamar Johnson, Malik Benson, Jaden Lamar, excuse me, Kenyon Sadiq, Decorian Moore had a couple yards in there. They just didn't need they didn't need anything to win this game. Obviously because of the 0 on the board by Texas Tech, but also it just didn't nothing felt forced, although Oregon forced it, if that makes any sense. Oregon fumbled the ball 3 times, recovered 2 of them. Texas Tech fumbled twice, lost both of them. That's kind of the really the theme of this game. Dylan Thieneman and Bryce Bodicher both combined for 24 tackles. Really, really solid play there from them. Ben Roberts on the other side, that guy is an NFL player if I've ever seen one. Ben Roberts was really good in this game. Had the interception, 16 total tackles, was doing everything for them. Jacob Rodriguez, same thing, 11 tackles, 11 total tackles, just did everything for them. David Bailey looked like he was about to take over the game, like Ruben Bain did last night, but Oregon was able to keep him in check. They adjusted correctly. And really, that's all I got for you guys. Nothing else really stands out from this game. I'm going to be completely honest. And that being said, I'm going to get off this live stream here, and I'm going to see you after the Ole Miss and Georgia game, and I'm also going to see you after the Rose Bowl as well. I'll be there. I'll be here. I'll be live streaming these games, and hopefully we'll get a better view count this time. But that's it from me, and I will be seeing you guys in the next one.